Verse 2, I will gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. There I will enter into judgment against them concerning my inheritance, my people Israel. For they scattered my people among the nations and divided up my land. Now, the nations of Israel and Judah succeeded only because Israel and Judah failed. They failed to, above all, seek God's heart. And then you know what happened? 49 years after the death of King Solomon, Judah and Israel turned on one another. They fought, they bickered, they warred against each other, they stole, they lied, they would not cooperate, they divided, parted their ways. They wanted absolutely nothing to do with one another. And then Jehoshaphat became king of Judah in 873. And through a miracle of God, he brought the nations together. Not quite sure how he did it, but he brought these people together. It's as if a church is divided, and then God sends a pastor who is able to minister to both sides of that congregation and bring them together that they might once again become the church that God wants them to be. And Joel said to Israel, this is exactly what God is going to do for us. God will do what no other king can do. God will defeat his enemy. Every enemy that God has in today's world will eventually be defeated by God. God will bring his people together. It's amazing how we've tried to hold together through covenants and alliances and conventions and denominations, but it doesn't work. But Joel says one day God will bring us all together. Our enemies defeated, we will be brought together, and God will give us peace. But Joel says that God is the author of those three things. We cannot find peace anywhere else. It has to come from God. But he says now the downside of that is when God pronounces this judgment, any one of us and every one of us who has misused the temporary power that God has vested in us, we will be judged. Every parent who has abused the role of a parent, every minister who has abused the power of his office, every president, every senator, every one of us who has failed to use or who has misused that power. And folks, when we look at that on a national scene, that means that we do things like we go out there and vote. Because not to vote is to fail to use your power. And I realize that more than half of Americans had absolutely no say in the last elections because they simply didn't vote. Joel said, each one of us will be responsible for how we've used or misused power. Secondly, God will judge us for the depersonalization of humanity. When we treat people as if they are nothing. Verse 3, they cast lots for my people, traded boys for prostitutes, sold girls for wine. Last week I talked about how stone cold our hearts have become. trafficking in human lives has never been so great as it is in our present society. Now think about it. We've had some dark days in our history. The trafficking in human lives has never been so great as it is in our society. That covers all of the angles: missing people, kidnaps, murders, drug addiction, alcoholics. You see, all of these things happen for a profit. And most of our families present today can stand and say, yes, we have a family member who has been affected by what you're talking about. You see, that's treating people as less than human. And not just the selling of a person, but it's any time that we treat someone with less respect than they deserve as a creation of God. And you know, if God would simply help us to be more sensitive to those about us, the person who's going to serve our lunch today, the person who's going to greet us when we enter the restaurant, the person who's going to take our money when we check out at the drugstore this afternoon, the person who lives down the street. We have to treat them as people of worth. Don't physically do it, but look around you. Are there people here this morning that you don't know? And will you let them pass as if they are not worth knowing? You see, God gives us that test every Sunday morning. He sends strangers our way. And says, will you treat this person as a person of worth? We will be judged for the use or misuse of our resources. Joel had a rather poignant message for Israel's, Judah's enemies. He said, you know, you have warred against us. You have defeated us. You have taken our resources, and you have plows and all kinds of equipment, and you think you've succeeded. But the day is coming when you will beat your plows into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. All of the blessings that you have, you will have to use to defend yourself. Now, I may be wrong, but I can't help but think of the billions of dollars that the United States is spending around the globe to defend our freedom and to defend the freedom of others. And yet we drive down our streets and they're full of potholes. Our senior citizens hardly have enough money to get by. They can't pay for their medications. Our schools are in a horrible condition. And yet, billions and billions of dollars go into the machine of war. That's exactly what Joel said.